Welcome, weary wanderer of the Wi-Fi realm, to the most boringly brilliant bedtime tale you never knew you needed. Tonight, we tiptoe through the dusty scrolls of history, not the loud bits with battles and beheadings, but the soft, scandalous whispers of ancient queens and their secret crushes. Yes, Cleopatra had a thing for a librarian. Yes, Queen Tamar fell for a cheese bard. And yes, you're about to fall asleep faster than a Roman senator in a toga seminar. So, fluff your pillow, silence your group chats, and prepare for 20 chapters of mildly thrilling, historically questionable romance. It's like Netflix, but with more scrolls and fewer plot twists. If this tale tickled your third eye or made you snort into your blanket, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from, whether it is your royal chamber, your couch throne, or a suspiciously squeaky bunk bed in the Temple of Snooze. Bonus points if you're watching from a pyramid or a cheese cellar. Now close your eyes, press play, and let the ancient gossip lull you into a majestic nap. Long before Cleopatra became the poster girl for eyeliner and empire, she was just a young queen with a soft spot for scrolls and scandal. Sure, she had Rome wrapped around her finger, but her heart? That belonged to someone far less famous. His name was Ptolemy Papyrus, the royal librarian of Alexandria. He was a man of mystery, dust, and questionable posture. His beard looked like it had been shaped by a papyrus shredder, and his robes smelled faintly of ancient glue. But oh, how he read aloud. Cleopatra would sneak into the great library at midnight, disguised in a hooded cloak made of peacock feathers. Because subtlety was not her strong suit, she'd tiptoe past the busts of philosophers and the sleeping cats of Alexandria until she reached the scroll room, where Ptolemy waited with a candle and a stack of the driest texts known to mankind. "Read me something boring," she'd whisper, reclining dramatically on a cushion shaped like a sphinx's paw. And Ptolemy, ever the scholar, would clear his throat and begin the agricultural treatises of Upper Nubia, Volume 4, Soil Moisture, and You. Cleopatra would sigh. So dull, so divine. Their love bloomed in the margins of manuscripts. They exchanged flirtatious footnotes. Once, he slipped her a coded message inside a scroll about irrigation. "Meet me behind the obelisk. Bring figs." It was the most romantic thing she'd ever read, but alas, their romance was doomed. Julius Caesar arrived, all swagger and sword, and Ptolemy was reassigned to cataloging beetle-shaped amulets. Cleopatra wept into her eyeliner, and the librarian faded into history, his only legacy a footnote in a scroll about composting. To this day, historians debate whether Cleopatra's famous charm came from her wit, her beauty, or her ability to pretend she cared about soil moisture. Queen Hatshepsut was a woman of power, pyramids, and perfectly sculpted cheekbones. She ruled Egypt with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how to pronounce hieroglyphics in 5 languages. But beneath the golden headdress and the ceremonial beard, yes, she wore one. It was a whole vibe. Hatshepsut harbored a secret. She was in love. Not with a pharaoh, not with a general, not even with a high priest. She was in love with her manicurist. His name was Nefer-Nail, and he was a legend in the royal spa. His hands were steady, his oils were lotus-scented, and his gossip was hotter than the desert sun. He could file a royal pinky nail into a crescent moon faster than you could say, dynastic legitimacy. Their romance began innocently enough. One day, while buffing her thumbnail with a sliver of obsidian, Nefernail whispered, "Your cuticles are divine today, Majesty." Hatshepsut blushed, "And your touch is worthy of the gods, Nefernail." From that moment on, every manicure became a flirtation. He'd paint tiny symbols onto her nails. Hearts, stars, once even a tiny scarab doing jazz hands. She'd giggle behind her papyrus fan, pretending not to notice. One day, he carved a miniature pyramid into her thumbnail and whispered, "I built this for you." She gasped, "You dare?" He winked, "I dare." But palace politics were cruel. The court astrologers declared that symmetrical nails were a bad omen. "They invite chaos," he warned. While wearing socks with sandals, Hatshepsut was devastated. Nefernail was reassigned to the Temple of Pedicures, where he spent his days massaging the feet of cranky priests. Hatshepsut mourned in silence. Her nails grew uneven. Her heart chipped like a poorly filed cuticle, never quite healed. In the misty corridors of Tang Dynasty China, where incense curled like gossip and silk rustled like secrets, Empress Wu Zetian ruled with a mind sharper than a jade dagger. She was the only woman to ever claim the imperial throne outright, and she did it with style, strategy, and a suspiciously well-organized filing system. But behind the scrolls of statecraft and the throne carved from dragon dreams, Wu had a secret, a soft, squishy, poetic secret. His name was Li Lyrical, a court poet with a talent for metaphors and a complete inability to stop rhyming. He was tall, mysterious, and always slightly damp. No one knew why. His poems were so flowery, they made actual flowers jealous. One day, Wu summoned him to her private garden, where koi fish judged silently and bamboo swayed like nosy aunties. "Recite me something boring," she commanded, sipping chrysanthemum tea with imperial indifference. Li bowed and began, "Ode to the Imperial Tax Code, Part 2, Brackets of Destiny." Wu blinked. That was oddly soothing. From then on, their secret meetings bloomed like plum blossoms in fiscal reports. He'd hide love poems inside bureaucratic memos. She'd respond with haikus disguised as royal decrees. One scroll read, "Your eyes are like moonlight on unpaid tariffs." Another, "I long for your touch like the Empire longs for accurate census data." Their love was lyrical, ludicrous, and deeply confidential. But palace intrigue was relentless. One jealous minister accused Li of rhyming without a permit. He was reassigned to the Department of Boring Prose, where he spent his days writing manuals on rice storage. Long before she ruled the Byzantine Empire, with pearls, politics, and a suspiciously well-trained peacock, Empress Theodora was a performer, not the kind who recited poetry in candlelit salons. No, Theodora was a full-blown circus girl, juggling flaming pine cones, wrestling mildly aggressive geese, and occasionally performing interpretive dance with a trained walrus named Gregory. Her life was loud, chaotic, and smelled faintly of roasted chestnuts and regret. But amid the honking horns and flying turnips, one man stood out, Maximus the mildly talented, a juggler with a heart of gold and a hygiene routine that could best be described as experimental. Maximus wasn't the best juggler in Constantinople. He wasn't even the best juggler in his own tent, but he had something Theodora couldn't resist: a crooked smile, a tunic that smelled like onions and ambition, and the ability to juggle flaming hoops while reciting love poems that didn't rhyme. Their first encounter was backstage, behind a curtain made of old toga scraps and questionable decisions. Theodora was applying goose repellent, a mixture of vinegar and sass, when Maximus stumbled in, juggling 3 loaves of bread and a tack scroll. "For you," he said, dropping the bread at her feet. "I loaf you." She blinked. "Is that a pun?" He nodded proudly. "I have more," and he did. Every day, Maximus found new ways to woo her. He juggled turnips into heart shapes. He trained Gregory the Walrus to honk her name. He once spelled out, "Be mine," using flaming pine cones, and nearly set the tent on fire. Their romance was ridiculous, reckless, and deeply romantic. They shared stolen kisses behind the elephant pens. They danced under the moonlight to the sound of distant honking. Theodora began to dream of a life beyond the circus, a life where she wore silk instead of sequins, and her lover didn't smell like roasted onions. Then came destiny. Theodora caught the eye of Emperor Justinian, who saw in her not just a performer, but a partner. He offered her a crown, a palace, and a lifetime supply of goose repellent. She accepted. Maximus was heartbroken, but supportive. "Go," he said, juggling a single onion. "Rule the empire, but never forget the circus." She didn't. Even as empress, Theodora kept a tiny turnip on her vanity. And every time she smelled roasted onions, she smiled. In the golden haze of ancient Egypt, where the sun kissed the Nile and gossip floated like incense through palace halls, Queen Nefertiti reigned with elegance, eyeliner, and an uncanny ability to pose dramatically in profile. Her beauty was legendary, her power undeniable, and her perfume collection absolutely overwhelming. But behind the alabaster statues and lotus-scented politics, Nefertiti had a secret, a fragrant, forbidden, fabulously floral secret. His name was Seneb, the scent slinger, a humble perfume peddler whose stall sat just outside the palace gates. He wore robes dyed with crushed hibiscus and always smelled like he'd bathed in a bouquet. His voice was soft, his smile crooked, and his knowledge of sandalwood disturbingly encyclopedic. Their first meeting was accidental. Nefertiti, disguised in a hooded cloak, because royal queens love dramatic disguises, wandered the market in search of something less imperial and more flirty. She stumbled upon Seneb's stall, where he was passionately describing the emotional journey of a new fragrance called Desert Whisper. "It starts with a hint of myrrh," he said, eyes closed, "then dances through jasmine, before collapsing into a sultry puddle of frankincense." She was intrigued. "Does it smell like power?" He opened his eyes. "It smells like secrets." From that moment on, Nefertiti visited the stall daily. She claimed it was for research, but everyone knew she was hooked on Seneb's scent and his smile. He'd spritz her wrist and whisper, "This one's called Royal Regret. It's perfect for palace drama." She'd giggle and reply, "I'll take 3. Their romance bloomed like a lotus in a humidity-controlled chamber. He created custom perfumes just for her. Moonlit Mischief for late-night scroll reading, Scandal in Sandals for diplomatic dinners, Forbidden Fig for, well, you know. But palace noses began to twitch. The high priest of incense declared Seneb's blends too emotionally complex. The royal sniffer, yes, that was a job, accused him of aromatic rebellion. Nefertiti was warned, stick to state-approved scents or face olfactory exile. Seneb was banished to the Temple of Bland Aromas, where he spent his days bottling essence of dust. Nefertiti mourned in silence, wearing only royal compliance, a perfume that smelled like beige. But late at night, she'd sneak a whiff of desert whisper and remember the man who made her heart and her wrists tingle. In the sun-scorched kingdom of Palmyra, where the desert winds carried secrets and the date palms gossiped in rustling tones, Queen Zenobia ruled with a gaze that could silence senators and a sword that could slice through imperial nonsense. She was a warrior, a scholar, and a woman who once conquered Egypt just to prove she could. But beneath the armor and ambition, Zenobia had a secret, a sandy, shaggy, slightly smelly secret. His name was Hamal ibn Humps, the royal camel whisperer. Hamal wasn't your average stable boy. He spoke fluent camel. He could calm a cranky dromedary with a single eyebrow raise. His beard was shaped like a saddlebag, and his robes were perpetually dusted with hay and mystery. He had a laugh like a hiccuping oasis, and a smile that made even the grumpiest camel spit with joy. Zenobia first noticed him during a royal inspection of the stables. While her generals saluted and her advisors babbled about saddle taxes, Hamal was gently massaging the hooves of a camel named Sassafras. "What are you doing?" Zenobia asked, intrigued. "Hoof therapy," he replied. "She's emotionally blocked." Zenobia blinked. "You're massaging her feelings?" He nodded. "Camels are complex." From that moment on, Zenobia found excuses to visit the stables. She claimed she was monitoring logistics, but everyone knew she was there for Hamal, and maybe Sassafras. He'd tell her stories about camel dreams, desert mirages, and the time he taught a camel to tap dance. It was a short-lived career. Their romance bloomed like a cactus in moonlight. He carved her name into a saddle. She gifted him a golden curry comb. They shared dates, the fruit, not the calendar kind, under the stars, while Sassafras snored nearby. But palace politics were pricklier than a sunburned cactus. The royal council declared Hamal too dusty for court life. "He smells like hoof," they whispered, "and he talks to animals." Zenobia was furious. She threatened to replace the entire council with camels. They laughed. She didn't. In the end, Hamal was reassigned to the farthest outpost in the desert, where he trained camels to deliver passive-aggressive messages to Roman governors. Zenobia visited him once, disguised as a merchant selling decorative sand. They embraced beside a dune shaped like a broken heart. Sassafras wept. In the heart of 19th century India, where rebellion simmered like chai on a monsoon morning, Rani Lakshmibai ruled the princely state of Jhansi with fire in her eyes and steel in her soul. She was a warrior queen, a strategist, and the kind of woman who could ride into battle with a toddler strapped to her back and still win. But even the fiercest queens have secrets, and Lakshmibai's was forged in iron and whispered in sparks. His name was Arjun Forjawala, the royal swordsmith. Arjun was no ordinary blacksmith. He didn't just make weapons, he made statements. His blades were sharp, his mustache sharper, and his poetry, well, it was etched into steel. Literally. He had a habit of engraving love notes onto the swords he crafted, which made for some very confusing battlefield moments. One day, Lakshmibai visited his forge to inspect a batch of new sabers. She picked one up, admired its balance, and noticed a tiny inscription near the hilt. "Your strength is my melody, your fury, my muse." She raised an eyebrow. "Is this a serenade?" Arjun, covered in soot and charm, shrugged. "It's multi-purpose. works as a weapon and a complement. Intrigued, Lakshmi Bai began visiting the forge more often. She claimed she was testing durability, but everyone knew she was there for Arjun's smoky smile and poetic metallurgy. He'd show her blades with verses like, "Strike true, my queen, for my heart is already pierced, tempered in fire, like your gaze at council meetings. This dagger is jealous of your sharp wit." Their romance was forged in heat and hammered in secrecy. They shared stolen moments between anvils and molten metal. He taught her how to shape steel. She taught him how to dodge palace gossip. Once, he crafted a sword with a hidden compartment that held a tiny love letter folded like a lotus. But war loomed. The British East India Company was not known for its appreciation of romantic weaponry. Lakshmi Bai had to lead her people, and Arjun had to supply the army. Their love became a battlefield of longing and logistics. Before her final battle, Arjun gifted her a saber engraved with, "If this blade sings, it sings your name." She rode into history wielding that sword, her heart heavy, but her grip steady. Arjun remained in Jhansi, forging blades and verses, waiting for a queen who would never return, but whose legend echoed in every strike of his hammer. In the misty mountains of medieval Georgia, where monasteries clung to cliffs and wine flowed like philosophical debates, Queen Tamar ruled with grace, grit, and a crown that doubled as a bird perch. She was wise, beloved, and known for her ability to settle disputes with a single raised eyebrow. But behind the royal decrees and diplomatic dinners, Tamar had a secret, a creamy, crumbly, curd-based secret. His name was Barduli the Brie, a traveling troubadour with a lute in one hand and a wheel of cheese in the other. Barduli wasn't famous for his voice. In fact, most people described his singing as emotionally confusing, but his lyrics, they were legendary. He wrote ballads about cheddar, sonnets to Gouda, and once composed a tragic opera about a wheel of camembert that rolled off a cliff. Tamar first encountered him during a royal picnic, while her advisors debated tax reforms and her guards wrestled with a rogue goose. Barduli stood beneath a fig tree, serenading a wedge of feta. "O crumbly queen of dairy dreams, your saltiness doth make me swoon." Tamar was intrigued. "Is that a love song to cheese?" He bowed. "To cheese, yes, but also to you." From that moment on, Tamar invited Barduli to every royal event. He performed at banquets, coronations, and once at a funeral, which was awkward, but the Gouda elegy was surprisingly moving. He composed a special ballad just for her. "My heart is like a melting wheel, softened by your gaze so real." Their romance ripened slowly, like a well-aged parmesan. They shared moonlit tastings in the palace cellar. He taught her how to play the lute, using a block of pecorino as a pick. She gifted him a cloak embroidered with tiny wheels of cheese. But palace politics curdled their joy. The royal council declared Barduli nutritionally distracting. One minister claimed his lyrics caused lactose-related unrest. Another accused him of smuggling illicit Stilton. Tamar was forced to choose, her throne or her troubadour. She chose the throne, but not without heartbreak. Barduli was exiled to the Valley of Derry, where he opened a cheese-themed inn called the Melting Heart. Tamar sent him letters disguised as cheese orders. He replied with ballads hidden in wheels of Gouda. And though history remembers Tamar as a wise and powerful queen, few know that her favorite lullaby was a song about mozzarella. In the rain-soaked castles of 12th century England, where loyalty was slippery and mud was considered a fashion statement, Empress Matilda fought for her crown with grit, guile, and a glare that could curdle milk. She was a claimant to the throne, a mother of kings, and a woman who once escaped a siege by pretending to be a snowdrift. Yes, really. But behind the politics and passive-aggressive parchment wars, Matilda had a secret. A warm, oat-scented, spoonable secret. His name was Oswin of Oates, the royal siege cook. Oswin wasn't a knight. He wasn't a noble. He wasn't even particularly good at baking. But he made porridge. Exceptional porridge. The kind that could soothe a cranky soldier, silence a squabbling council, and make a queen sigh into her spoon. Their first meeting was during the infamous siege of Oxford Castle. Matilda was trapped, surrounded by enemies, and dangerously low on morale and snacks. Oswin, armed with a ladle and a questionable beard net, appeared in the cellar with a steaming bowl. "It's siege porridge," he said, "made with oats, hope, and a dash of rebellion." She took a bite. It was warm. It was comforting. It tasted like victory and cinnamon. From that moment on, Oswin became her secret solace. While her advisors argued and her enemies catapulted passive-aggressive messages over the walls, she'd sneak down to the kitchen for spoonfuls of sanity. He'd whisper sweet nothings like, "I stirred this clockwise, just for you. I added nutmeg because it reminded me of your sass. If you were a grain, you'd be steel-cut." Their romance simmered slowly, like a pot over low flame. They shared stories, spooned porridge, and once danced in the pantry to the rhythm of boiling water. He carved her initials into a wooden ladle. She gifted him a cloak embroidered with tiny oat stalks. But war is cruel, and politics even crueler. When Matilda escaped the siege disguised as a snowdrift, still iconic, Oswin stayed behind, stirring hope into every pot. He was captured, questioned, and eventually released, because no one could make porridge like him. Matilda never forgot him, even as she faded from the throne, and history turned its gaze to her son. She kept a ladle by her bedside, and every winter she made siege porridge, oats, hope, and a dash of rebellion. In the frost-kissed halls of 17th century Sweden, where philosophy was fashionable and furniture was suspiciously minimalist, Queen Christina ruled with wit, whimsy, and a refusal to be predictable. She wore trousers, quoted Descartes, and once declared war on boredom. Her court was a swirling snow globe of scholars, artists, and people who had very strong opinions about punctuation. But behind the Latin lectures and candlelit debates, Christina had a secret, a quiet, ink-stained, spine-stitching secret. His name was Elias Folderson, the royal bookbinder. Elias was not a man of many words. He preferred to let his bindings speak for him. He stitched with precision, pressed with passion, and smelled faintly of parchment and mystery. His hands were calloused, his hair perpetually tousled, and his blush immediate. Every time Christina entered his workshop, he turned the color of a scandalous sonnet. Their first encounter was over a misbound treatise on metaphysics. Christina, curious and slightly bored, wandered into the bookbinding chamber, wearing a cape made of velvet and existential dread. "This book is upside down," she said, flipping it dramatically. Elias looked up, flustered. "It's avant-garde." She smirked. "So am I." From that moment on, Christina visited the workshop regularly. She claimed she was inspecting the integrity of the bindings, but everyone knew she was there for Elias, and maybe the smell of freshly pressed vellum. He'd show her books with secret compartments, hidden poems, and once a pop-up diagram of Aristotle doing jazz hands. Their romance unfolded like a well-bound folio. He stitched her initials into the spine of a philosophy volume. She gifted him a bookmark embroidered with tiny crowns. They shared whispered conversations over glue pots and leather scraps. Once, he bound a book of blank pages and titled it, "The Things I Can Say to You." But palace whispers grew louder. The royal archivist accused Elias of emotional embellishment. A jealous noble claimed his bindings were too suggestive. Christina was warned. A queen must not flirt with footnotes. She responded by commissioning a book titled Mind Your Business, a royal memoir. Still, the pressure mounted. Elias was reassigned to the royal indexing department, where he spent his days alphabetizing treaties and weeping into his glue. Christina, ever defiant, kept his blank book by her bedside, and though she eventually abdicated the throne and wandered Europe in search of meaning and better coffee, she never forgot the man who bound her heart in silence. In the lush, sun-drenched lands of 17th century Angola, where rivers whispered secrets and mangoes fell with dramatic flair, Queen Njingambande ruled with brilliance, bravery, and a throne made of pure defiance. She negotiated with colonizers like a chess master, led armies with poetic rage, and once disguised herself as a servant just to eavesdrop on a treaty. Iconic, but behind the diplomacy and dazzling war paint, Njinga had a secret, a tropical, husk-covered, slightly nutty secret. His name was Quito, the coconut courier. Quito wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a noble. He wasn't even particularly good at directions, but he delivered coconuts perfectly. He had a sixth sense for ripeness, a smile that could soften stone, and a laugh that sounded like a waterfall giggling. His job was simple: deliver coconuts from the royal grove to the palace. But his timing? Impeccable. Their first meeting was during a tense negotiation with Portuguese envoys. Njinga was mid-sentence, threatening to turn their cannons into flower pots, when Quito burst into the chamber, carrying a basket of coconuts. "Delivery for the queen," he said, panting. "Extra juicy, like your reputation." The room went silent. Njinga raised an eyebrow. "You flirt during diplomacy?" He shrugged. "I flirt everywhere." From that moment on, Quito became her favorite distraction. She claimed she needed daily coconut updates, but everyone knew she was hooked on his husky charm and fruit-based metaphors. He'd whisper things like, "This one's sweet, but not as sweet as your victory speech. I cracked this one with my bare hands. Thinking of you helped. If I were a coconut, I'd want to be in your basket." Their romance ripened slowly, like a mango in denial. They shared moonlit coconut tastings. He taught her how to open one with a dramatic flourish. She gifted him a sash embroidered with tiny palm trees. Once, he carved her initials into a coconut and floated it down the river to spread the vibe. But palace politics were prickly. The royal advisors deemed Quito nuttily distracting. One general claimed his deliveries caused emotional turbulence. Njinga was warned. A queen must not fall for fruit. She responded by declaring coconut diplomacy a national strategy. Still, the pressure mounted. Quito was reassigned to the northern grove, where he delivered coconuts to mildly important officials with no sense of humor. Njinga missed him terribly. She kept a coconut by her throne, cracked, carved, and kissed. And though history remembers her as a fierce queen who defied empires, few know she once wrote a love poem titled Ode to a Coconut and the Man Who Carried It. In the foggy finery of 19th century Britain, where corsets were tight and emotions tighter, Queen Victoria reigned with a stiff upper lip and a heart that beat to the rhythm of empire. She adored order, respected tradition, and had a fondness for dogs with names longer than most treaties. But behind the lace curtains and parliamentary paperwork, Victoria had a secret, a steamy, steeped, scandalously Scottish secret. His name was Hamish McSteep, the royal gardener turned unofficial tea brewer. Hamish wasn't listed in any official records. His job was technically horticultural assistant, but everyone knew he was the man behind the Queen's favorite brew. He had a beard like a mossy hedge, hands that smelled faintly of thyme, and a voice that could lull a parliament into nap time. Their first encounter was in the palace greenhouse, where Victoria had wandered in search of solitude and possibly a fern to confide in. Hamish was there, brewing tea over a tiny flame, humming a tune that sounded suspiciously like a lullaby for begonias. "What is that?" she asked, sniffing the air. "Earl Grey," he replied, "but stronger, like your opinions." She blinked. "You steep tea and compliments?" He nodded. "I steep everything." From that moment on, Victoria began requesting botanical consultations daily. She claimed it was for the roses, but everyone knew she was there for Hamish and his emotionally charged infusions. He'd serve her blends like Empire Elixir with a hint of rebellion, Monarch's Midnight, best served with secrets, Scandalous Chamomile, soothing but judgmental. Their romance brewed slowly, like a kettle on low flame. They shared sips in the conservatory, whispered sweet nothings over teacups, and once reenacted the Boston Tea Party, using biscuits and dramatic accents. Hamish wrote her poems on tea-stained parchment. She responded with pressed flowers and coded messages hidden in biscuit tins. Once, he carved her initials into a teacup and buried it beneath the royal rosebush for luck and legacy. But palace protocol was unforgiving. The royal butler accused Hamish of emotional steeping. A duchess claimed his blends caused unregulated swooning. Victoria was warned. A queen must not fraternize with foliage. She responded by declaring tea a matter of national security. Still, the pressure mounted. Hamish was reassigned to Balmoral, where he brewed tea for visiting dignitaries who didn't understand metaphors. Victoria missed him terribly. She kept a tin of Monarch's Midnight by her bedside and sipped it during moments of melancholy. And though history remembers her as a stern sovereign who wore black for decades, few know she once wrote a love letter that began, "To the man who made my heart steep in the ancient kingdom of Silla, where mountains whispered wisdom and the moon took its sweet time rising, Queen Seondok ruled with intellect, intuition, and a telescope that made jealous ministers squint. She was Korea's first reigning queen, a lover of science, and the kind of monarch who could quote Confucius while building an observatory shaped like a wine bottle. But behind the celestial charts and royal decrees, Seondok had a secret, a dreamy, ink-stained, constellation-obsessed secret. His name was Jinwoo of the Quill, a royal scribe with a passion for stars and a tendency to doodle galaxies in the margins of official documents. Jinwoo wasn't just a scribe. He was a cosmic romantic. He believed every person had a star twin, every emotion a lunar phase. His robes were perpetually dusted with ink and stardust, or possibly flour, no one was sure, and his eyes sparkled like Orion's belt after a good cry. Their first meeting was accidental. Seondeok had requested a report on agricultural yields, but Jinwoo had accidentally submitted a scroll titled The Emotional Journey of the Moon. "This is not about rice," she said, raising an eyebrow. "No," he replied, "but it is about longing." She blinked. "Go on." From that moment on, Seonduk began requesting astronomical updates daily. She claimed it was for palace planning, but everyone knew she was hooked on Jinwoo's poetic star maps and emotionally charged lunar metaphors. He'd whisper things like, "Tonight, Venus is jealous of your glow. The stars are aligning, but only when you smile. If I were a comet, I'd crash into your orbit." Their romance unfolded like a slow eclipse. They shared moonlit strolls through the palace gardens, traced constellations on silk, and once built a miniature observatory out of rice cakes and stubbornness. Jinwoo wrote her a poem titled My Heart in Retrograde. She responded with a decree declaring stargazing a royal pastime. But palace politics were cloudy. The royal astrologer accused Jinwoo of emotional astronomy. A jealous noble claimed his star charts caused romantic confusion. Seondeok was warned, a queen must not flirt with the cosmos. She responded by commissioning a mural of the Milky Way, featuring herself and Jinwoo riding a meteor. Still, the pressure mounted. Jinwoo was reassigned to the Department of Weather Scrolls, where he spent his days predicting rain and missing stars. Seondeok kept his poem hidden inside her telescope, and though history remembers her as a wise queen who built Korea's first observatory, few know she once whispered to the stars, "Tell him I still see him in the sky." In the chilly harbors of medieval Denmark, where the wind howled like a Viking with a toothache, and cod was considered currency, Queen Margrethe IV ruled with icy brilliance and a crown that doubled as a weather vane. She united kingdoms, outwitted nobles, and once negotiated peace while wearing mittens. She was sharp, strategic, and surprisingly fond of pickled herring. But behind the treaties and frostbitten diplomacy, Margrethe had a secret, a salty, slippery, slightly smelly secret. His name was Bjorn Fishfinger, the royal fishmonger. Bjorn wasn't noble. He wasn't refined. He wasn't even particularly clean. But he had charm, raw, rustic, and wrapped in seaweed. His beard was braided with tiny shells. His boots squelched when he walked, and his laugh sounded like a seal hiccuping. He sold fish with flair, tossing trout like bouquets, and complimenting customers with lines like, "This haddock reminds me of your cheekbones." Margrethe first encountered him during a surprise inspection of the harbor, while her advisors debated trade tariffs and her guards tried to wrestle a rebellious lobster. Bjorn was serenading a basket of herring. "Oh, slippery sirens of the sea, your scales shimmer like royal decree." She raised an eyebrow. "Are you flirting with fish?" He grinned. "Only until someone better comes along." From that moment on, Margrethe made frequent economic assessments of the fish market. She claimed it was for trade data, but everyone knew she was hooked on Bjorn's fishy metaphors and sea-scented charm. He'd whisper things like, "You're the only queen who makes my cod blush. If I were a flounder, I'd flop into your arms. Your gaze is sharper than my filleting knife." Their romance was slippery, but sincere. They shared moonlit walks along the docks, swapped fish recipes, and once built a throne out of oyster crates. Bjorn gifted her a crown made of crab claws. She responded with a decree declaring flirtatious fishmongering a protected art form, but palace politics were unforgiving. The royal treasurer accused Bjorn of emotional inflation. A bishop claimed his compliments caused moral confusion. Margrethe was warned. A queen must not consort with cod. She responded by hosting a royal banquet featuring Bjorn's best catch and seating him beside the Archbishop of Anchovies. Still, the pressure mounted. Bjorn was reassigned to a remote fjord, where he sold fish to monks who didn't appreciate poetic mackerel. Margrethe missed him terribly. She kept a dried herring on her desk, wrapped in silk and scented with longing. And though history remembers her as the queen who united Scandinavia, few know she once wrote a love letter that began, "To the man who filleted my heart." In the wild, whispering jungles of 19th century Madagascar, where lemurs leapt like gossip and volcanoes simmered with dramatic flair, Queen Ranavalona I ruled with fire, fearlessness, and a throne carved from obsidian and sass. She was fierce, unpredictable, and once declared war on boredom by outlawing dull hats. But behind the royal decrees and lava-hot diplomacy, Ranavalona had a secret, a string-plucking, ash-dusted, emotionally eruptive secret. His name was Tovo Tremolo, the volcano violinist. Tovo wasn't a noble. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't even particularly punctual. But he played the violin like it owed him money. His melodies could make birds cry, lava pause, and queens sigh into their ceremonial soup. He lived near Mount Ambra, where he performed nightly concerts for the volcano itself, claiming it was his most honest audience. Their first meeting was accidental. Ranavalona had traveled to the volcano to inspect its mood. Volcanoes were known to be temperamental. When she heard a haunting tune drifting through the smoke, she followed the sound and found Tovo, barefoot, bow in hand, serenading a bubbling crater. "What are you doing?" she asked, half intrigued, half alarmed. "Playing a lullaby," he replied. "She's restless tonight." She, the volcano. She likes minor chords. From that moment on, Ranavalona made frequent geological inspections. She claimed it was for safety, but everyone knew she was drawn to Tovo's lava lullabies and ash-sprinkled charm. He'd play for her under the stars, whispering things like, "Your voice is the only thing hotter than magma. If I were a tremor, I'd shake for you." This melody is called Molten Majesty. I wrote it while thinking about your eyebrows. Their romance erupted slowly, like a volcano with stage fright. They shared moonlit concerts beside steaming vents, carved love notes into cooled lava, and once built a miniature violin from volcanic glass. Tovo gifted her a bow made from lemur whiskers. She responded with a decree declaring volcanic, serenading a national treasure. But palace politics were explosive. The royal geologist accused Tovo of emotional tectonics. A jealous minister claimed his music caused unregulated swooning. Ranavalona was warned, a queen must not flirt with fault lines. She responded by commissioning a statue of herself, playing the violin atop a volcano. Still, the pressure mounted. Tovo was reassigned to a distant crater, where he played for tourists who didn't understand allegorical lava. Ranavalona missed him terribly. She kept a piece of obsidian shaped like a violin beside her throne. And though history remembers her as a queen who ruled with fire and fury, few know she once wrote, a lullaby titled For the Man Who Made the Volcano Sing, in the lush, breeze-kissed paradise of 19th century Hawaii, where palm trees danced like gossiping aunties and waves whispered lullabies to the moon. Queen Liliuokalani ruled with grace, grit, and a heart that beat in rhythm with her people's songs. She was a composer, a poet, and the last reigning monarch of the Hawaiian kingdom. Her legacy woven into melodies and resistance. But behind the royal compositions and political heartbreak, Liliuokalani had a secret. A strumming, stumbling, three-chord secret. His name was Keone Kekua, the ukulele understudy. Keone wasn't a virtuoso. He wasn't a noble. He wasn't even particularly good at tuning. But he had charm, gentle, goofy, and wrapped in coconut-scented sincerity. His ukulele only knew 3 chords, but he played them like they were sacred. His voice cracked like a seashell under pressure, and his laugh sounded like a dolphin trying to whistle. Their first meeting was during a rehearsal for a royal concert. Liliuokalani had composed a new anthem, and Keone had been assigned to assist with ambience. He showed up late, barefoot, and carrying a ukulele decorated with stickers of pineapples and existential quotes. "Are you the understudy?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. He nodded. "I know 3 chords, but I play them with feeling." She blinked. "That's either brave or deeply concerning." From that moment on, Keone became her favorite distraction. She claimed he helped her test musical resilience, but everyone knew she was enchanted by his off-key serenades and emotionally unstable strumming. He'd play for her under banyan trees, whispering lyrics like, "Your smile is the 4th chord I never learned. If I were a melody, I'd loop around your heart. This song is called Queen of My Quirks. I wrote it while eating mangoes." Their romance swayed slowly, like a hammock in a breeze. They shared moonlit jam sessions, carved love notes into driftwood, and once built a sandcastle shaped like a ukulele. Keone gifted her a seashell shaped like a treble clef. She responded with a lay woven from lyrics, but palace politics were tone-deaf. The royal music director accused Keone of emotional dissonance. A jealous noble claimed his serenades caused unregulated swaying. Liliuokalani was warned. A queen must not harmonize with amateurs. She responded by composing a lullaby titled 3 Chords and a Crown. Still, the pressure mounted. Keone was reassigned to the Royal Coconut Orchestra, where he played backup percussion using hollow fruit. Liliuokalani missed him terribly. She kept his sticker-covered ukulele beside her writing desk, and though history remembers her as a queen who composed Aloha, Oh, and fought for her people as sovereignty, few know she once whispered to the waves, "Play me something off-key and make it honest." In the frosty forests and onion-domed splendor of 10th century Kievan Rus, where diplomacy was delivered via flaming revenge, and winter lasted approximately forever, Queen Olga of Kiev ruled with a mind sharper than a battle axe and a heart wrapped in mystery. She was a widow, a warrior, and once burned down an entire city using birds. Yes, birds. Long story. But behind the vengeance and veils, Olga had a secret. A warm, waxy, wonderfully wicked secret. His name was Mikhail Meltov, the royal candlemaker. Mikhail wasn't a noble. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't even particularly good at math. But he made candles. Exceptional candles. His wax was smooth, his scents subtle, and his flames emotionally expressive. He claimed each candle had a soul, and once held a funeral for a broken taper. Their first meeting was during a palace blackout. A storm had knocked out every torch, and Olga, wrapped in a fur cloak and mild irritation, stumbled into the candle chamber. "Why is it so dark?" she demanded. Mikhail, surrounded by flickering flames and smelling faintly of honey and rebellion, replied, "Because the light was waiting for you." She blinked. "Are you flirting? Or just overly poetic?" He smiled. "Yes." From that moment on, Olga began requesting illumination consultations. She claimed it was for palace ambiance, but everyone knew she was drawn to Mikhail's waxy wisdom and flame-flickering charm. He'd present candles with names like Royal Reckoning, Smells Like Lavender and Vengeance, Midnight Majesty, Glows Brighter When You're Dramatic, Scandalous Soot, Smells Like Secrets and Cinnamon. Their romance burned slowly, like a candle in a drafty chapel. They shared moonlit wax-pouring sessions, carved love notes into candle molds, and once built a chandelier shaped like a heart. Mikhail gifted her a candle that flickered in rhythm with her heartbeat. She responded with a decree declaring candle making with emotional undertones, a sacred art. But palace politics were flammable. The royal fire marshal accused Mikhail of reckless romance. A jealous noble claimed his candles caused unregulated swooning and mild smoke damage. Olga was warned a queen must not ignite affection. She responded by hosting a banquet lit entirely by Mikhail's candles, each one scented with sass. Still, the pressure mounted. Mikhail was reassigned to the Monastery of Monotone Light, where he made plain candles for monks who preferred emotional darkness. Olga missed him terribly. She kept his heartbeat candle beside her throne, lighting it during moments of melancholy and mild mischief. And though history remembers her as the queen who avenged her husband with flaming pigeons, few know she once whispered to a candle, "Burn for me, even when I cannot," in the mist-veiled lands of ancient Japan, where whispers traveled faster than arrows, and the moon was considered a reliable witness. Queen Himiko ruled the mysterious kingdom of Yamatai with silence, sorcery, and a gaze that could make cherry blossoms blush. She was a shaman queen, a spiritual leader, and the kind of monarch who could hold court without saying a word and still win every argument. But behind the rituals and riddles, Himiko had a secret, a polished, reflective, emotionally refracted secret. His name was Akio of the Silver Surface, a mirror merchant with a knack for flattery and a suspiciously poetic inventory. Akio wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a priest. He wasn't even particularly good at counting change. But he sold mirrors, enchanted ones, if you believed his sales pitch. His stall was tucked between a lantern shop and a tofu stand, and his mirrors came in all shapes: round, oval, heart-shaped, and one that looked suspiciously like a potato. Their first meeting was during a royal procession. Himiko, veiled and silent, passed by Akio's stall. He held up a bronze mirror and said, "This one reflects not just your face, but your fate." She paused. "My fate," he nodded, "and possibly your cheekbones." From that moment on, Himiko began requesting reflective consultations. She claimed it was for ceremonial purposes, but everyone knew she was drawn to Akio's shiny charm and metaphor-heavy salesmanship. He'd present mirrors with names like Moon's Whisper, shows your dreams if you squint; Petal of Truth, reveals your best angle and worst decisions; The Blushing Reflection, foggy when flustered; Their romance unfolded like a slow sunrise in a foggy valley. They shared moonlit mirror polishing sessions, carved love notes into lacquered frames, and once built a shrine shaped like a compact. Akio gifted her a mirror that only showed her smile. She responded with a decree declaring reflective romance a sacred right. But palace politics were opaque. The royal oracle accused Akio of emotional distortion. A jealous noble claimed his mirrors caused unregulated introspection. Himiko was warned a queen must not gaze too deeply into affection. She responded by commissioning a mirror the size of a rice barn, engraved with poetry and rebellion. Still, the pressure mounted. Akio was reassigned to a distant village, where he sold mirrors to farmers who used them to check for cabbage in their teeth. Himiko missed him terribly. She kept his enchanted mirror hidden beneath her ceremonial robes, gazing into it during moments of quiet longing. And though history remembers her as a mystical queen who ruled through ritual and mystery, few know she once whispered to her reflection, "Show me the face that made me feel seen." In the misty moors of ancient Britannia, where rebellion brewed like bitter ale, and the Romans were about as welcome as a soggy biscuit, Queen Boudica led the Iceni tribe with fire in her eyes and vengeance in her braid. She was a warrior queen, a mother, and the kind of woman who could ride a chariot into battle while delivering a motivational speech and a side-eye. But behind the war cries and wheel-spinning fury, Boudica had a secret, a greasy, gear-grinding, emotionally turbocharged secret. His name was Garrick Greasehand, the royal chariot mechanic. Garrick wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a druid. He wasn't even particularly good at remembering which wheel went where, but he could fix anything with a grunt, a wrench, and a handful of suspicious herbs. His tunic was perpetually stained with axle oil. His beard smelled faintly of horse, and his laugh sounded like a cart hitting a pothole, unexpected and oddly comforting. Their first meeting was during a pre-battle inspection. Boudica, armored and impatient, was checking her war chariot when Garrick emerged from beneath it, holding a wheel and a half-eaten turnip. "It's wobbling," he said, "much like my feelings when you're near." She blinked. "Are you flirting while covered in grease?" He nodded. "It's my natural state." From that moment on, Boudica began requesting wheel consultations. She claimed it was for tactical efficiency, but everyone knew she was drawn to Garrick's oily charm and emotionally unstable engineering. He'd whisper things like, "Your rage is the fuel that powers my axle. If I were a wheel, I'd spin only for you. This chariot's suspension is jealous of your balance." Their romance rolled slowly, like a cart on cobblestones. They shared moonlit tune-ups, carved love notes into hubcaps, and once built a miniature chariot for a squirrel named Reginald. Garrick gifted her a wrench engraved with her battle cry. She responded with a decree declaring mechanics of the heart a sacred trade. But tribal politics were bumpy. The War Council accused Garrick of emotional distraction. A jealous warrior claimed his grease caused unregulated swooning and slippery handshakes. Boudica was warned. A queen must not stall for love. She responded by riding into battle, with Garrick's wrench tucked into her belt. Still, the pressure mounted. Garrick was reassigned to the outer stables, where he repaired carts for sheep and sulky druids. Boudica missed him terribly. She kept a tiny wheel on her necklace, polished and kissed before every battle. And though history remembers her as the queen who led a revolt against Rome, few know she once whispered to her chariot, "Drive me to the man who made my heart turn," in the sun-dappled courts of medieval France, where lutes were strummed with longing and love letters were practically a currency. Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine reigned with wit, wisdom, and a wardrobe that could intimidate a tapestry. She was a patron of poetry, a crusader of charm, and the kind of queen who could host a salon, start a war, and critique a sonnet all before lunch. But behind the courtly dances and diplomatic drama, Eleanor had a secret, a tuneless, parchment-clutching, emotionally overqualified secret. His name was Thibaut the Tone-Deaf, a troubadour whose singing voice could make roses wilt, but whose love letters could make hearts bloom. Thibaut wasn't famous. He wasn't melodic. He wasn't even allowed near the palace choir. But he wrote beautifully. His verses were so tender, so vivid, so absurdly romantic, that even the grumpiest knight once cried into his soup after reading one. His voice, however, sounded like a goose auditioning for opera. Their first meeting was at a poetry contest. Eleanor was judging, sipping wine and silently ranking metaphors. Thibaut stepped forward, cleared his throat, and sang a ballad so off-key that a tapestry fell off the wall. She winced. That was bold. He bowed. The lyrics are better on paper. She read them and gasped. From that moment on, Eleanor began requesting literary consultations. She claimed it was for cultural enrichment, but everyone knew she was enchanted by Thibault's ink-stained fingers and emotionally reckless rhymes. He'd write her verses like, "Your gaze is a siege I surrender to gladly. If I were parchment, I'd beg for your quill. My heart is a castle, and you are the catapult." Their romance unfolded like a scroll in the wind. They shared moonlit writing sessions, carved love notes into tree bark, and once composed a duet where she sang, and he just mouthed the words. Thibault gifted her a poem written on rose petals. She responded with a decree declaring, "Tone-deaf troubadours, with excellent vocabulary, a protected species." But court politics were pitchy. The royal composer accused Thibaut of emotional plagiarism. A jealous duke claimed his metaphors caused unregulated swooning and poetic unrest. Eleanor was warned. A queen must not harmonize with heartbreak. She responded by commissioning a tapestry of herself reading Thibault's poetry while surrounded by fainting nobles. Still, the pressure mounted. Thibaut was reassigned to the archives, where he wrote love letters for nobles who couldn't spell. Eleanor missed him terribly. She kept his rose-petal poem in her crown, pressed between diplomacy and dreams. And though history remembers her as a queen who shaped empires and inspired legends, few know she once whispered to a scroll, "Sing to me with silence, and I'll hear every word." And so, dear dreamer, we close the scroll on 20 tales of queens and their secret loves, of librarians and camel whisperers, of cheese bards and coconut couriers, of violinists, scribes, and tone-deaf troubadours who dared to love royally. These stories may be mildly boring, occasionally ridiculous, and delightfully sleepy, but they remind us that even the most powerful hearts crave a quiet moment, a secret smile, and a love that hums beneath the crown. So, fluff your pillow, tuck in your thoughts, and let the whispers of ancient romance lull you into dreams where queens still fall in love with poets who can sing, and warriors who smell faintly of soup. Good night, noble listener. May your dreams be scroll-scented and serenaded by sleepy stars.